Thank you today for joining. And if you're watching this video, appreciate you watching the video and hope that you check out more. We have more than 60 uh, videos recorded. The idea is that we want to learn something each time. And no matter how many times you've gone over it. Today's topic that we picked is called water. So we're calling it water genesis. In other words, where did water even come from? And since where did it come from? What's expected? Can you give me any details? Well, today we're going to look at the genesis part of water and what's mentioned about water. And hopefully the goal here is that you'll hear something you've never heard before, learn something out of the Bible you didn't know was there. It's kind of our goal. Now, what we're going to ask first is, or at least we're going to make the statement here and prove it. The water is older than the earth. So there might be people that question this. Well, I encourage you to look at all these scriptures as we go. Now, if you want to follow along, we're just going to be in Genesis. So you don't have to flip through a lot of scriptures or books. People that don't know Bible know the Genesis is the first book in the Bible. So we're going to look at Genesis today and follow and see exactly what it says, and maybe we can bring up something that you hadn't thought about before. So first of all, we're going to say water is older than the earth. How are you going to prove that? And then if you do, those that are just want to Google it and try, you can actually see where science has said, yes, water came and then formed what we know today as earth, that water indeed is older than the earth, even that's proven in science. But we're looking at proof in the Bible. So another thing too is water is the first physical element, first creation element that's stated in the Bible. So in other words, the plan and how we're going to do things and all are not physical. Well, since you made the creation, there's a physical creation. I can touch water, trees, and all. So what is the first physical part of the creation mentioned? It's water. So we're going to look at that to begin with. Now, most people know Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, and that has to do with the plan. Let's look at verse 2. Genesis 1:2. Hope you're following today. I'll quote here. And the earth was without form and void. We'll stop right there for a second. What do you mean void? Well, the earth didn't exist yet. So the earth didn't exist. It's without form and void. Then there's a semicolon there. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So that's the first thing that's mentioned is there's water out there first. Okay, and so the creation, physical part of the creation, first thing that's mentioned, first thing stated in the Bible about any part of the physical creation is water. It's right here in the second verse. It says you don't even have an earth yet, but you do have water. So it moved upon the space of the water. Now, going down to verse 6, we're going to look at verse 6 and verse 7. Excuse me. Genesis 1. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, firmament means a big opening or an opening of some sort. All right. So this firmament, we're going to end up finding out that's the universe. So we know what the universe is, and then we have galaxies in our solar system and all are all inside the universe. Well, the Bible's mentioning that is called the firmament. It's called the big opening. So where did you make this opening? In the midst of the waters. So there's going to be a big opening that's going to divide water from water. That's correct. Verse 7, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. and it was so. So now you find out that, yes, there's actually water separated from other water. And what is it separated by? Well, the Bible term is firmament. Our term would be universe. So the universe is what separates our water from the water above. So the water above is what? Outside the universe. And then what we have is under the universe is what? The water we have. So we know that the water on planet Earth. Now, water is a mind-boggling thing. For one thing is science is always searching for water is first thing they'd like to find in space. So looking for any type of water, any blue planet, that type of thing. And then the fact that you can't make water, that's an unusual thing there. You can make things and all, but you can't take elements off the earth and suddenly make water. You have the water that you have. So I'm not even sure everybody knows that. So I'm assuming I like to, when I'm preaching and teaching, assume that the other person doesn't know. And so I don't assume what they know. All right, so this is interesting. So there's a firmament, there's waters, and there's water above and water below. So that would mean that the universe is actually surrounded by water, and that a piece of the water was taken out is where Earth's going. Yeah, because he's going to say, "Let dry land appear," and that's where the Earth's going to be, the ground that we know it. All right, let's move on down. We're still in Genesis 1. So what we're going to find out now is water is where living creatures began on the earth. Okay, when you looked in science or was taught science in school, then they would tell you what? Well, if we were measuring things by carbon, and the oldest life forms came out of the water, and then from the water to the land, and actually the last thing formed would be a human being. Well, that's exactly what the Bible has. So you study with us, you'll find out that science and Bible agree a lot more than what you may be assuming. So especially the order of things. So the Bible also has that. The Bible says, yeah, life came out of the water first. Look at verse 20. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life. And fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And so this heaven is not the capital H heaven where we want to go after the judgment day. This heaven is the same as the universe, or what we would actually just call the atmosphere. That's where the birds fly. So a lot of times like the whole universe in Genesis 1 is mentioned, is called the firmament, whereas the part of the air, or what we would call the atmosphere around the earth, is called the heaven. So the birds would fly in the heaven, and that would be a small h. So there's small things in here you can look at while you're studying that come up at points of interest. But one thing you do is learn. So no matter how much Bible you learn, there's always more to learn. And there's always more. In fact, that you've studied this before, you'll still learn something new. That's what's amazing about the Bible. Hope that you find interest in it. We're Cyber Church of Christ. You want to study with us and learn more, and we'd love to have your questions. All right, now we're going to point out some interesting facts here. Excuse me. Prior to the flood, it did not rain on the earth. Well, yeah, there may be folks that don't. You do know it didn't rain before the flood. No, I didn't know that. Yeah. There's no such thing as water falling from the skies. Where does it say that? Well, in Genesis chapter 2, that's where we're going now. So Genesis chapter 2, we're going to look at verse 5 and 6 and learn a little bit more about water. Okay. Genesis 2:5, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. So it had not even rained on the earth. That's correct. Okay, well then how did the earth get its water? How did the trees get water, and how was water available for the things that were created in nature? Well, that's answered in verse 6. So that was Genesis 2:5, Genesis 2:6. But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Oh, okay, so that's pretty interesting. You're saying what now? Well, there was no rain. We had a mist that came up from the ground, and that's what watered what part of the earth? No, actually, it says the whole face of the earth. So studying this, it looks like the earth had one climate. It rained everywhere. Well, it didn't rain anywhere at all. Everywhere it got watered by mist. How do you know that? Because it says whole face of the earth. Didn't say parts of the earth. So that's interesting. So we're looking at water before the flood and finding out that, hey, it didn't even rain before. So Noah's teaching, and what? Noah's teaching that rain's going to fall from the sky, that there's going to be water just coming out of the sky from out of nowhere. Okay, well, that's no wonder they thought he was kind of crazy. Water doesn't come from there. It comes from underneath the earth, and it's in a mist. Well, yeah, except that the father told him, I'm going to end up flooding the earth, and the water's coming from the sky. So he preached that. So you can see it when he's 600 years old, finally, when he gets on board of the ark. All right, so that was Genesis 2:5 and 2:6. We're finding out, hey, it never even rained on the earth before the flood. That there was a mist come about, and that watered the whole face of the planet. Okay, well, that's very interesting. And then now we're going to look at our next section here. Water that surrounds the universe flooded the earth. Okay, now back up a minute. You do what now? Well, let's ask yourself, the earth, let's just say you believe in the flood and believe the Bible, and that there was a flood. Where did that water come from? Not evaporated. If it evaporated off the earth and came back down on the earth, earth still has the same amount of water. How are you going to flood the earth if the earth already has a finite amount of water on it? Well, and that's answered in the Bible. So where is this water coming from? Well, remember we started off our sermon about the water surrounding the universe. Keep that in thought here while we read. We're going all the way now, Genesis chapter 7. So flip up a few chapters there. We're studying water. We're studying Genesis water. Where did water come from? We've already found out it existed before the world existed. We already had water. All right. And if you wanted to look, check out water in the hereafter and all, that's a whole nother sermon. And then what about the water for baptism? Now there's have to be water here for baptism. Water is an integral part of your spiritual life and your physical life. If we're going to send a man in space, human beings in space, what are we doing? We're going to take water. Why? Because we can't find water out there. We'll take it with us. So we need that for survival. All right. But where did this water come from? Let's get back to that question. You're going to flood the whole earth with water. How? I mean, it would be flooded already if you use the water that's on the earth. That's just logical. All right. So water that surrounds the universe, that's what flooded the earth. You mean the water that's around the whole universe? That could be opened up and then flood the earth? Yeah, we're going to study that right now. Look at Genesis 7, verses 11 and 12. Genesis 7:11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Well, you're telling me now how you did the flood. Yeah. What happens is we open the windows of heaven, water poured forth, flooded the earth, and then that water goes back to where it came from. We're going to prove that. Okay, well, this may be new to you then. Did you ever ask yourself, where did this water come from that flooded the earth? Since the earth already holds the water that it holds, and we can't make any water. So we have, if you want to call it that, stuck with the water that we have on planet Earth. All right, so Genesis 7:11 said what now? Fountains of the great deep were broken up and the windows of heaven were open. Verse 12, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Well, before you said that it had not rained on the earth, that there was a mist. Remember, we looked at that in Genesis 2, verses 5 and 6. Verse 6 said, hey, there was no rain before. It had not caused it to rain, was verse 5, and then told you how the earth was watered when mist, with Genesis 2:6. Now we get up to Genesis 7. We're going to talk about the flood. Genesis 6 will tell you how the Father got disgusted with man and his sin. Man's living to be 900 and something years old, and all of his thoughts are evil. So Father's going to destroy the earth with water. Going to whatever man built, whatever civilizations there were, those are going to all be destroyed by water. We just need a faithful person on planet Earth to come up with and execute the plan. That's how Noah was picked. All right, so now we're looking at Genesis 7, verses 11 and 12, that the rain came from where? The windows of heaven. They were open and it rained 40 days and 40 nights on the planet where it never rained before. So the water we already had on planet Earth, that's right, and now we're adding water to it. Well, how are you going to add water to it unless that water existed somewhere else? Well, that's when we started off the sermon with that. The water's around. Now, does science know that? Well, no, they're looking at the universe and it's always expanding. Okay, and it's okay when there's no border, we can't find a border, we can't find it's out there, right? But the Bible tells you what's out there, that there's water on the outside of the universe. And also that's where the water from the flood came from. We're proving that today. All right, so it rained for 40 days and 40 nights on planet Earth. That's how it got flooded. It got flooded from the windows of heaven being opened. All right, let's go on to chapter 8. So now we're looking at Genesis chapter 8. That's where we're going to end today. First 3 verses of chapter 8 in Genesis. Water that flooded to the earth returned to its source. Okay, so you're not going to just have just water and that's all there is. Well, no, because you can step outside now and look. We still have the same amount of water that we have, that we've always had, except during the flood. The flood, extra water came down, flooded the earth. What happened to that water? Have you ever asked yourself that? Okay, the whole earth got flooded with water. Where did the water go? Okay, well, then go to chapter 8 and it'll tell you. Okay, just look at chapter 8, Genesis 8:1. And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And there's a colon there. Now, if you look up this word cattle in the Hebrew, you'll find out that that it has to do with all mammals, all living animals, and it uses the word cattle. So this is not just bovine was the only thing on the earth. We find out they went in 2 by 2, 7 of the good. So you can study the flood and study Noah's Ark, and you would find out. But anyway, you look up that word cattle, you'll find out it doesn't just specifically talk about cows. But anyway, he's talking about now that Noah and the animals were on the ark. All right, and God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. Now, after the colon, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. Well, this assuaged here, if you look it up in the Noah Webster's dictionary, that's not how you spell assuage. Assuaged is spelled with a U, not a W. Okay, well, I have that here. Assuaged, if you just looked it up in the dictionary, it would mean abate, to go back to where it was. Now, I did mention, so if you see here, like in this Strong's, I could look up the word assuaged in here, and it'll tell you the Hebrew word for that. And I would look and it would say, hey, that's Hebrew. Go look at word number 7918. So if you'll see my notes on the PDF, you'll say, well, assuage, spelled the way we spell it, has the word that means abate, go back. And then if you were to look at the H7918 out of here, out of the Strong's, then you would find out that means to recede. So there'd be a whole lot of definitions, same as in English dictionary where there's several definitions. But the first definition of that is to recede. So recede would mean it went back to where it was. We've looked on our atmosphere here and past our atmosphere into our solar system, and we don't see any water where there was water and now it's on the earth and went back to there. Well, no, you're not going to find water there. Water, we've already explained that in the Bible, is outside the universe. So you'd have to go outside the universe, except that it's so large, man will not discover the edge, what we call, hey, what do you mean an edge? And then there was a scientist at one time that actually took and put a vacuum inside a water tank to see if it would hold, and it actually held there. Back, and that would be what? Simulating how the universe works. So it's basically like a big vacuum and surrounded by water. And then there's a small piece of water there that we know is planet Earth. All right, so you're saying now you explain where the water came from for this Noah's flood, or when we call it that, it's the Father's flood. But Noah and the ark, they survived. They survived on what? On faith, on believing, doing God's will. That's how we're saved in the end, because we believed, and then we got saved in the end by doing what? By doing His will. Well, that's how we got an example right off the bat in Genesis about doing His will and getting saved. Now we'll find out later getting saved by water is what happens when you get baptized into the kingdom. What's involved? Water. Did Jesus get baptized? Yes, in water. He and his cousin John the Baptist was in there, and they did what? Went into water. And then if you look up baptism, that's not even today's sermon, you'll find out it means to be immersed in water. So that's how important water is. You're going to get baptized under the water, and this water existed before the earth, and is actually water outside the universe also. Yes. And you got baptized with that. Yes. And you need water for survival. Yeah, every human knows that. Water for survival. Okay, so that's how precious water is. And the fact that we can't make water is substantial. All right, so the waters were safe. So here's what happens is we're going to unleash the windows of the heaven, unleash all the water on planet Earth. It gets flooded. And now we get to chapter 8, and the Father says, okay, well, now the water is going to go back. It's going to actually be assuaged, abated. Yeah, it's going to recede. It's going to go back to where it came from. All right, Genesis 8:2. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. Oh, so what you had, this windows of heaven were stopped. Well, underline, you had windows of heaven were opened. Yeah, that was in Genesis 7:11. The windows of heaven were open. And then when you get to Genesis 8:2, he says he stopped them. So it'd be like shutting the windows. So you opened up, the water poured down, flooded the earth. let them open, and then now the water all recedes, and then you stop that and then close that back off. Yeah, it's what we have today. Except he said, well, I'll put a bow in the sky. But you know, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to destroy the earth by water again. So don't look for it to be coming down from where it is. This is a one-time event. He said, next time I'll destroy the whole universe and all, it'll be like implode. And he mentions fire and brimstone. So it gets destroyed in a different way. It basically disintegrates the whole universe. And then what? Well, then the judgment day. So you have your life on earth, judgment day, and then life in the hereafter. That's where your spirit goes. What do we want? Well, Cyber Church of Christ, we want everybody to be saved in the end. Yeah, you're going to be using water here on planet Earth for your survival, but for your spiritual survival, you'll be using water to get baptized in. Okay? And now we're going to find out, if you study Revelation and all, there's also water in the hereafter. So it's pretty interesting. So we're looking at just the Genesis part of water here and getting you to think, where did this flood come from? Where's the logic here? Where would the water come from? And then how do you get rid of the water? And we're finding that out today. It's actually written out in Genesis. Water came from outside the universe. Windows were open, flooded the earth. Then the water receded back to where it was, and those windows were closed. Let's go to Genesis 8:2. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. Now let's finish today with Genesis 8:3. Genesis 8:3, and the waters returned from off the earth continually. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. Oh, I was just going to ask you, well, how long did that take for all the water to, you said 40 days and 40 nights that water was coming down. Well, then how long did it take for the water to go back to where it came from? 150 days. Oh, well, I just thought it was like magic snap finger deal. No, it came down in a steady stream from the windows being open and went back as a steady stream, and then the windows were shut. And it came, how long did that take? Well, in earthly time, if you're measuring it, says right here in Genesis 8:3, 150 days. Now we're back to the water that originally was on planet Earth, water that we have today. The Pacific Ocean, your rivers and lakes and all that, that's how much water we have. And if I was to advise human beings, I would say take care of the water we have here on planet Earth. That's all we got. So my advice would be to make it as pure as possible, to keep it clean. And every human knows they need water for survival, just to survive. So water is the oldest thing. We found that out today in the sermon. Water is older than the planet Earth itself. And then science measuring things, they prove that. Water is older. The water caused the flood. We find out where that water came from. And then how did Earth get back to where we have planets? Where we have continents, to where we have dry ground. Well, it's because the water receded back to where it came from. And it was abated. And it even tells you how long it took. So anyway, what I wanted today's sermon to be would be like a lecture, like a sermon where you learn something. There should be a didactic element to every sermon. The person listening ought to learn something. And actually, the guy preparing the sermon, he learns something every time he gets in the Bible. So if you think you know it all, you don't know it all. You're always going to be learning something. All right, so let's just review. So we had water was older than the earth, dry land appeared. We had man and all the animals and all living on planet Earth. Then they were saved in an ark, which we didn't go over today, but a lot of you know some of the details. Then once all that water receded and went back to where it was, then man could go back living on planet Earth. and the animals and everything that we know today. Okay. So anyway, I named the sermon Water Genesis because I'm using the scriptures out of Genesis, and it has to do with where did water come from. That would be the genesis of the water. This is how it came. Anyway, I'm hoping that this sparked your interest. And if you're watching the videos, that you watch more. And that's all we're interested in. We're interested in learning, proving things. We prove all things. Why are you going to prove it? I have to show you where the scripture is. What you ask me my opinion. I don't have an opinion, not according to the Bible. I'll just show you where that scripture is. Someone will say their opinion about something, and I'll go, where's that verse? Why? Because I'm wanting to prove where I got Bible students. I'm going to show them where that is. Oh, well, they don't know where that is. Well, it's an opinion. Can't prove an opinion. Bible doesn't have opinions. That's there's a sermon called Seems Right. It seems right to the person because why? Well, they don't have proof. They can tell you where the scripture is. It just seems right. Okay, we don't, Cyber Church guys, we don't do seems right. We don't do opinions. We go, where is that in the Bible? Where does it say that the earth got flooded? Well, we'll show you here. We can go through Genesis. And look at chapter 6, 7, and 8. We'll tell you all about the flood. So anyway, God, you talking about having a loving God, and that he wouldn't destroy things and people won't be going to hell in the end. Well, then sometimes I'll say, have you ever heard of the flood? So he was so disappointed with man, he flooded the earth. All right, so anyway, that's today's sermon. Today's sermon was Water Genesis, and hopefully it gets you head scratching there. Always wonder where the water from the flood came from. We found that out today. What happened to it after the flood? We found that out today. It's all documented in Genesis. Anyway, I hope that you learned something today and you want to learn more about us. We're Cyber Church of Christ. Cyber CO Christ is Gmail if you want to email us, and then cyberchurchofchrist.org is our website. And we hope to see you actually live. Hope you have a great day and that you took something from the sermon today.